Ma'am, last warning. Hand me the ID to scan or you're going in cuffs for obstruction.
That order is illegal. You are violating State Directive 404B and the 4th Amendment.
I don't care who you think you are. Turn around.
My name is Eleanor Vance, and if you arrest me, you will lose your badge.
The high-definition body camera mounted on Officer Kyle Miller's chest recorded every frame of the disaster that was about to unfold. It captured the harsh, fluorescent lighting of the state office building lobby, the polished marble floors, and the moment a career ended not with a bang, but with the quiet, devastating click of handcuffs. Officer Miller, a 29-year-old with a high and tight haircut and a posture that screamed aggression, had absolutely no idea that the woman he was blocking from entering the elevators was the architect of the very laws he was sworn to enforce. She wasn't just a visitor. She wasn't a random member of the public. She was Dr. Eleanor Vance, the Chief General Counsel for the State Department of Public Safety. She had spent the last 25 years drafting oversight policies, advising governors on police reform, and litigating constitutional defense for the state. And she was currently standing calmly in a navy blue Saint John suit holding a leather briefcase, watching a young man destroy his future in real time. Before we get into the details of this infuriating and vindicating encounter, I need you to take a second. Look at where you are right now. Are you safe? Are you free? Because stories like this remind us how fragile those concepts can be when authority goes unchecked. If you believe that nobody is above the law, especially those who wear the badge, I want you to hit that subscribe button right now. Leave a comment telling me I know my rights if you've ever had to stand your ground against someone abusing their power. This story is going to make your blood boil, but you need to see how it ends. Eleanor Vance had woken up that Tuesday morning with a clear agenda. At 56 years old, she moved with the slow, deliberate grace of a woman who had nothing left to prove to anyone. She had raised 3 children, buried a husband, and climbed to the absolute pinnacle of the state's legal apparatus. Today, she was conducting a scheduled compliance audit at the satellite offices downtown. It was supposed to be routine. She arrived at the security checkpoint at 10:15 a.m. The lobby was relatively quiet, with only a few people in line. When she reached the front, she placed her bag on the belt for the X-ray machine and stepped through the metal detector. It didn't beep. She collected her bag and turned toward the elevators. That was when Officer Miller stepped in front of her. "Ma'am, hold on," Miller said. His voice was flat, commanding. He didn't say please. He didn't offer a greeting. He just held out a hand, palm up. "I need your ID." Eleanor paused. She shifted her briefcase to her left hand and reached into her purse. She pulled out her state-issued driver's license. She held it up, clearly visible at eye level. The photo was clear. The expiration date was valid. The name Eleanor Marie Vance was printed in bold black letters. "Good morning, officer," she said, her voice steady and warm. She believed in civility, even when it wasn't reciprocated. Miller didn't look at the card. He looked at the small black handheld device in his other hand. "I need you to hand it to me. I need to scan it." Eleanor's internal alarm bells rang immediately. 3 months ago, she had personally authored Directive 404B, a binding memorandum sent to all state law enforcement agencies. The directive explicitly forbade the digital scanning and data harvesting of identification from citizens entering public buildings unless there was a specific articulate security threat. The state had been sued twice for storing visitor data on unsecured servers, and Eleanor had put a stop to the practice to protect the department from further liability. Officer Miller wasn't just asking for her ID. He was asking her to participate in a violation of the policy she had written. "I'm afraid I can't let you do that, officer," Eleanor said, keeping the card visible but out of his reach. "I am presenting my identification for visual inspection as required by building protocol. You can verify my name and my face, but I do not consent to a digital scan of my private data." Miller's jaw tightened. He was used to compliance. He was used to people who were intimidated by the uniform, the gun on his hip, and the radio on his shoulder. He wasn't used to a black woman in her 50s telling him no in a calm, educated tone. It's not a request, ma'am. It's security policy. If you want to enter this building, the ID gets scanned. We need to log who is in the facility. I understand you need to know who is here, Eleanor replied. She didn't take a step back. She didn't raise her voice. You have a logbook right there on the desk. You can write Eleanor Vance 10:17 a.m., but Policy 404B specifically prohibits the use of magnetic strip readers on non-suspects. If you scan this card, you are seizing digital information without a warrant and without cause. I'm trying to help you avoid a violation. Miller stepped closer. He was 6 feet tall, towering over her. He dropped his hand to his belt, resting it near his handcuffs. This was an intimidation tactic, pure and simple. I don't know what policy you think you know, but I'm the one in charge of this checkpoint. You're obstructing a security screening. That is a crime. Now hand over the ID or we're going to have a very different conversation. Eleanor looked at him, really looked at him. She saw the impatience in his eyes, the arrogance of a man who had never been told he was wrong. She realized in that moment that this wasn't just a misunderstanding. This was a culture problem, and as the Chief General Counsel, she was the one responsible for fixing it. Officer, I am not obstructing, Eleanor said, articulating every syllable with surgical precision. I am complying with the law. I have presented valid identification. You have visually verified it. There is no legal requirement for my data to be entered into your portable database. In fact, the Fourth Amendment protects against unreasonable seizures of papers and effects, and the Supreme Court has ruled that digital data falls under that protection. If you persist in demanding a scan as a condition of entry to a public building, you are crossing a line that strips you of your qualified immunity. Miller laughed. It was a short, sharp bark of a laugh. Okay, we got a lawyer here. You think quoting the Supreme Court works on the street? You're refusing a lawful order. He keyed his radio. Dispatch, send me a second unit to the main lobby. I have a subject refusing security protocols causing a disturbance. I am not causing a disturbance, Eleanor noted, gesturing to the empty space around them. I am standing quietly. You are the one escalating this encounter. By now, people in the lobby had stopped walking. A courier with a stack of packages paused near the wall. A young woman in a hoodie pulled out her phone and started recording. Eleanor noticed the phone and gave a subtle nod. Documentation was everything. Miller turned back to her, his face flushing red. He felt the eyes of the public on him. He felt his authority slipping, and he grasped for it the only way he knew how, through force. I'm going to give you one last chance. Give me the ID to scan, or you are going under arrest for failure to obey a lawful order and obstruction of government operations. Eleanor took a breath. She had a badge in her purse, a gold badge that said, Chief Counsel. She could have pulled it out right then. She could have ended this in 5 seconds. But if she pulled her badge, Miller would back down because of her rank, not because he learned the law. If she used her privilege to escape, he would do this to the next person, someone who didn't have a gold badge, someone who couldn't defend themselves. She had to let this play out. She had to let him make the mistake so the department could correct it. Officer, Eleanor said, her voice dropping an octave, becoming deadly serious. I am giving you a specific legal warning. The order you are giving is not lawful. It violates Agency Directive 404B and the state code. If you arrest me, you are committing a false arrest. You will be personally liable. Look at my ID again. Read the name. Think about what you are doing. I'm done thinking, Miller snapped. He reached for his handcuffs. Turn around. Hands behind your back. Very well, Eleanor said. She placed her briefcase on the floor. She turned slowly, smoothing the front of her blazer. She placed her wrists together behind her back. I am not resisting. I am complying under duress. The metal cuffs ratcheted tight. They bit into the soft skin of her wrists. It was painful, humiliating, and terrifying even for someone who knew the system. To be stripped of your freedom even for a moment is a profound violation. Miller grabbed her arm roughly. You're under arrest. You have the right to remain silent. He recited the Miranda warning as he marched her past the staring crowd. "Shame on you," the woman recording with the phone yelled out. "She didn't do anything." "Back up," Miller shouted at the witness, not breaking his stride. "Unless you want to join her." He led Eleanor out the revolving doors and into the humid morning air. He pushed her toward his patrol car parked at the curb. He opened the back door and guided her in. The back of a police car is designed to be uncomfortable. The hard plastic seat forces you to sit at an awkward angle. With her hands cuffed behind her, Eleanor had to lean forward to avoid excruciating pain in her shoulders. The car smelled of stale sweat and industrial disinfectant. Miller got into the driver's seat. He was pumping with adrenaline. He felt like he had won. He had taken down a troublemaker. He looked at her in the rearview mirror. "You know, if you people would just listen, this wouldn't happen. You want to come into a secure building, you follow the rules. It's not hard." Eleanor sat perfectly still. She didn't respond to the "you people" comment, though she filed it away in her memory. "Officer," she said calmly from the back seat, "I would like you to note the time. It is 10:22 a.m. You have detained me. Where are we going?" "Central booking," Miller said, putting the car in gear. "You can explain your legal theories to the judge." "I intend to," Eleanor said, and then she went silent. She closed her eyes and began to compose the opening paragraph of the federal complaint in her head. The drive to the precinct took 15 minutes. Miller played the radio loud sports talk. He was trying to assert dominance over the space. Eleanor tuned it out. She focused on her breathing. She needed to remain composed. If she showed anger, if she cried, if she shouted, she would be just another hysterical arrestee in his narrative. She had to be unimpeachable. They arrived at the precinct. Miller pulled into the sally port, the garage door rumbling shut behind them. He hauled her out of the car. Her suit was wrinkled now. Her wrists were throbbing, but her head was high. He walked her through the heavy steel doors into the processing area. The intake room was busy. Phones were ringing, officers were typing reports. Behind the high booking desk sat Sergeant Thomas. Thomas was a 58-year-old veteran, a man with gray hair and a tired face. He had been on the force for 30 years. He had sat on 3 different oversight committees that Eleanor had chaired. He knew her voice. He knew her face. He knew that she was the only reason the department had retained its accreditation last year. Miller marched Eleanor up to the counter. "I got a refusal to comply," Miller announced proudly. "Obstruction at the state building. Refused security screening." Sergeant Thomas didn't look up immediately. He was finishing a form. "Name?" he asked. "She wouldn't scan," Miller said. "But the license says Vance. Eleanor Vance." Sergeant Thomas's pen stopped moving. He froze. Slowly, very slowly, he looked up. He looked at Miller, then he looked at the woman standing in handcuffs. His eyes widened. His jaw literally dropped. He stood up so fast his chair rolled back and hit the wall with a loud bang. The entire room went quiet. "Mrs. Vance," Thomas whispered. "Hello, Sergeant Thomas," Eleanor said pleasantly. "I hope your wife is recovering well from her surgery." Thomas looked at the handcuffs on her wrists. He looked back at Miller. His face went from shock to a deep, pale horror. "Miller," Thomas said, his voice trembling, "do you have any idea? Do you have any goddamn idea who this is?" Miller looked confused. She's the arrestee. She wouldn't scan her ID." "She's the Chief General Counsel," Thomas roared. The sound echoed off the cinder block walls. "She runs the legal division. She writes the policies. Take those cuffs off her. Right now." Miller surely thought he had misheard. "The what?" "She is the top lawyer for the Department of Public Safety, you idiot." Thomas came around the desk. He didn't wait for Miller. He pulled his own key out and frantically unlocked the cuffs. "Dr. Vance, I am so sorry. I am so sorry." Eleanor rubbed her wrists. There were deep red indentations where the metal had dug in. She looked at Miller. The color had drained from his face. He looked like a ghost. The arrogance was gone, replaced by the sickening realization that his life as he knew it was over. "Sergeant Thomas," Eleanor said, her voice cool and commanding. "Do not apologize. You didn't arrest me. Officer Miller did." The door to the inner office flew open. Captain Reynolds, the precinct commander, came running out. He had heard the shouting. He took one look at Eleanor Vance nursing her wrists and looked like he might pass out. "Dr. Vance," Reynolds stammered. "Please come into my office. We can sort this out. This is a terrible mistake." "No, Captain," Eleanor said. She didn't move. She stood in the center of the booking room. "We are not going into your office. We are going to handle this right here on the record." She turned to Miller, who was shrinking against the wall. "Officer Miller, I want your portable scanner placed on this counter, now." Miller hesitated. Now!" Captain Reynolds barked. Miller unclipped the device and placed it on the counter. "That device," Eleanor said, pointing to it, "contains the personal data of every citizen you have illegally scanned today. It is evidence of a systematic violation of the Fourth Amendment and State Directive 404B. I was coming to the building today to audit the security logs. It seems I found what I was looking for." She turned to Sergeant Thomas. "I want this arrest fully documented. Do not void the ticket. I want the booking number generated. I want the mugshot taken if that's your procedure, because I am going to sue this department and I want the paper trail to be perfect." "Dr. Vance," the captain said, sweating, "you don't have to do that." "I absolutely do," Eleanor replied. "Because if you did this to me, a woman in a suit with the power to fire you, imagine what Officer Miller has been doing to the teenagers in hoodies or the workers in uniforms who don't know the law. I am not leaving until this officer is relieved of duty." The captain looked at Miller. There was no saving him. "Miller gun and badge, on the desk." Miller's hands shook as he unholstered his weapon. He unpinned the badge from his chest. He placed them next to the scanner. He looked at Eleanor, tears forming in his eyes. "Ma'am, I didn't know. I was just following." "You weren't following the law," Eleanor cut him off. "You were following your ego, and today that ego cost you your career." Eleanor Vance stayed at the precinct for another 2 hours. She made them process the paperwork. She ensured the body camera footage was flagged for indefinite retention. She called her own deputy counsel to come and take possession of the scanner as evidence. When she finally left, she walked out the front door, rubbed her sore wrists, and got into the Uber she had called. She didn't go back to work. She went home, poured herself a glass of tea, and sat in her living room, finally letting the adrenaline fade. The fallout was nuclear. The lawsuit Eleanor filed wasn't for money for herself. It was a class action suit on behalf of every person whose data had been illegally harvested by the department's scanners. The internal affairs investigation revealed that Officer Miller had scanned over 4,000 IDs in 6 months, creating an illegal database of innocent citizens. Miller was terminated 3 weeks later. His certification was revoked by the state board, meaning he could never work as a police officer in the state again. The captain was forced into early retirement for failing to supervise his officers. The department had to purge all the data and pay a settlement of $1.2 million, which Eleanor directed entirely to a legal defense fund for indigent defendants. But the real change happened in the academy. The video of Eleanor's arrest became mandatory viewing. Every recruit had to watch Officer Miller destroy his life in 10 minutes because he refused to listen. They learned that the badge isn't a crown. They learned that respect is a two-way street. Eleanor Vance continued to serve as chief counsel for another 5 years. She retired with honors. But she always kept a framed photo in her office, not of a handshake with the governor, but a grainy still from a security camera showing her in handcuffs, head high, standing her ground. It reminds her and everyone who sees it that freedom isn't free. It has to be fought for, sometimes in a courtroom and sometimes in the lobby of an office building on a Tuesday morning. So I have to ask you, would you have had the courage to do what Eleanor did? Would you have let them put the cuffs on just to prove a point? Most people would have just scanned the ID to get on with their day. And that's what bad officers count on. They count on your convenience being more important than your rights. If this story resonated with you, if you believe in holding the line, drop a like and share this video. We need more people who know their rights and aren't afraid to use them. Until next time, stay safe, stay educated, and keep watching.
Stop right there.
You're not authorized to go upstairs.
Hands where I can see them. I am authorized. I'm a federal tenant.
You are blocking lawful access. Step aside.
You don't get to tell me how this works. Show me a driver's license or get out.
You just crossed the line, touch me again, and this becomes a federal
Don't
crime.
threaten me. Get on.
The high-definition lens of the lobby security camera was impartial recording at 30 frames per second in 4K resolution. It captured the polished marble floors, the abstract art on the walls, and the sunlight streaming through the floor-to-ceiling glass of the Outcome Tower in downtown Washington, D.C. And most importantly, it was about to capture the moment a 29-year-old private security guard named Kyle Vance made a decision that would not only cost him his livelihood, but would ignite a legal firestorm reaching the highest levels of the federal government. Kyle Vance had no idea that the man walking through the revolving doors wasn't just another Saturday visitor. He didn't know that this man dressed in dark denim jeans, a navy blue blazer, and a crisp white button-down had spent the morning on a secure video conference with the Secretary of Homeland Security. He didn't know that Marcus Thorne, the 58-year-old black man checking his watch, held a top-secret clearance and served as a senior advisor on domestic terrorism and infrastructure protection. To Kyle, Marcus was just a variable that didn't fit the pattern. It was 10:45 a.m. on a Saturday. The building, a mixed-use skyscraper housing high-end corporate offices and several federal government satellite bureaus, was mostly quiet. Weekend protocol was simple: check identification, verify the access list, and ensure the safety of the property. But Kyle, who had been working for Citadel Security Solutions for just under 18 months, often viewed his role through a lens of aggressive enforcement rather than service. Marcus Thorne entered the lobby with the confident, purposeful stride of a man who had walked these corridors for a decade. He held a leather briefcase in his left hand and his encrypted government-issued smartphone in his right. He needed to retrieve a hard drive from his secure office on the 40th floor before heading to the airport for a summit in Geneva. He walked toward the sleek glass turnstiles that guarded the elevator bank. He already had his RFID key card in his hand, a white card with a holographic chip distinct from the standard visitor passes. "Hold it right there." The voice boomed across the empty lobby, echoing off the marble. Marcus stopped. He didn't jump. He didn't look guilty. He simply paused and turned his head slowly toward the security podium. Kyle Vance stepped out from behind the desk. He was a stocky man, his uniform shirt strained slightly at the biceps, his utility belt weighed down with a radio keys, pepper spray, and a collapsible baton. He walked with a swagger that suggested he was patrolling a prison yard rather than a corporate lobby. "Can I help you?" Marcus asked, his voice a deep baritone, calm and measured. "Where do you think you're going?" Kyle asked, closing the distance between them. He didn't offer a greeting. He didn't say, "Sir." His thumbs were hooked into his belt fingers, resting dangerously close to his equipment. "I'm going to my office," Marcus replied, lifting his key card slightly to show it. "I have a few things to pick up." Kyle scoffed a short, sharp sound of dismissal. He looked Marcus up and down, his eyes lingering on the jeans. In Kyle's mind, executives wore suits even on Saturdays. Delivery drivers and maintenance workers wore jeans. And in Kyle's worldview, black men in this building on a weekend were almost certainly there to fix something or deliver something. "Deliveries are around back," Kyle said, pointing a thumb over his shoulder toward the service entrance. "You need to use the freight elevator. Read the sign on the door." Marcus turned his body fully toward the guard. He had dealt with men like Kyle before, men with a little bit of authority and a lot of insecurity. I'm not making a delivery. I work here. My office is on the 40th floor. The 40th floor is restricted access, Kyle said, his voice rising. That's government leasing. You expect me to believe you have business up there dressed like that? I don't expect you to believe anything based on my attire, Marcus said, his patience holding firm but his eyes narrowing. I expect you to look at this credential. He held out the card. It will open the turnstile. If it doesn't, you can stop me, but you need to let me swipe it. I don't need to do a damn thing, Kyle snapped. He stepped directly in front of the turnstile path, physically blocking Marcus's way. And I'm telling you to leave the premises and go to the loading dock. If you're authorized, the freight manager will have you on the list. Marcus sighed. It was a sigh of exhaustion, not from the physical act of walking, but from the weight of having to explain his existence for the 1,000th time in his life. He looked at the camera in the corner of the ceiling. He hoped it was recording audio. Officer, Marcus began using the term loosely. You are making a mistake. I am a tenant in this building. I am not a courier. Now please step aside. The air in the lobby seemed to grow thinner, the silence more oppressive. Kyle Vance did not step aside. If anything, he planted his feet wider, adopting a stance he had likely seen in movies or during his brief failed stint in the police academy 2 years prior. To him, Marcus's calm demeanor wasn't a sign of innocence. It was a sign of arrogance. It was defiance. And Kyle Vance did not tolerate defiance. You're not listening to me, Kyle said, his voice dropping an octave, trying to sound intimidating. I run this lobby. I decide who goes up and who doesn't. And right now I'm deciding that you're loitering. Let me see some ID. Not that key card, I want to see a driver's license. Marcus held his ground. He knew the building protocols better than Kyle did. He had helped write the security addendum for the federal leases in the building. You have no authority to demand my driver's license unless I am a visitor requesting a guest pass. As I stated, I am a tenant. My key card is my identification for entry. You want to play lawyer? Kyle sneered. He took a step closer, invading Marcus's personal space. The smell of stale coffee and mint gum wafted from him. I can have you trespassed in 2 minutes. Now give me the ID or get out. I am not playing lawyer, Marcus said, his voice turning steel hard. I am informing you of the building's policy. I am going to step around you and swipe my card. If you touch me, you will be committing assault. Don't you threaten me, Kyle shouted. The sound drew the attention of the only other people in the lobby, a young couple waiting near the fountain and a janitor pushing a cart near the elevators. They stopped to watch. The janitor, an older Hispanic man who had seen Marcus many times, looked worried. I am not threatening you, Marcus corrected him. I am stating facts. Marcus moved to his right, attempting to bypass the guard to reach the card reader. It was a non-aggressive move, purely functional. Kyle reacted instantly. He sidestepped and shoved Marcus hard in the chest. The impact forced Marcus back a step. He didn't stumble, but the physical contact crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. Marcus looked down at his blazer where Kyle's hand had struck him, then looked back up at the guard's face. You just assaulted a federal employee, Marcus said quietly. I stopped a trespasser from breaching security, Kyle yelled, playing to the invisible audience, trying to justify his aggression. Get your hands out of your pockets now. Marcus hadn't put his hands in his pockets. They were at his sides, clearly visible. But Kyle was escalating his adrenaline, pumping his narrative of the dangerous intruder taking over his reality. My hands are visible, Marcus said. I am going to reach into my inside jacket pocket to retrieve my wallet. I am doing this to show you my government credentials. Do not touch me again. Don't reach for anything. Kyle's hand dropped to his utility belt. He unsnapped the holster for his taser. The yellow plastic weapon gleamed under the lobby lights. Back away from the turnstile. The woman near the fountain had pulled out her phone. She was filming. Marcus noticed it peripherally and felt a grim sense of satisfaction. Good. Let the world see. Officer, Marcus said, keeping his movements glacial. You are currently detaining a senior advisor to the Department of Homeland Security without probable cause. You have assaulted me. You are threatening me with a weapon. I am giving you one chance to de-escalate this situation. Call your supervisor. Right now. I am the supervisor on duty. Kyle lied. He wasn't. The shift supervisor was on a break in the basement. And I'm calling the police. Please do, Marcus said. Call them. Ask for the Metropolitan Police District 1. Tell them you have Marcus Thorne detained. Kyle hesitated for a fraction of a second. The name sounded specific. The confidence was unnerving. But Kyle's pride was too swollen to allow for retreat. He grabbed his radio. Dispatch, I've got a 1031 in the lobby. Aggressive male refusing to leave. Requesting PD backup immediately. Aggressive, Marcus repeated, raising an eyebrow. I haven't raised my voice. I haven't moved toward you. The cameras will show exactly who is being aggressive. Shut up. Kyle pointed a finger in Marcus's face. You don't talk until I tell you to talk. You think because you got a fancy suit jacket you can walk in here and do whatever you want. I know your type. You think the rules don't apply to you. My type? Marcus asked. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. And what type is that specifically? Kyle didn't answer, but the sneer on his face spoke volumes. He didn't need to say the slur. It was hanging in the air, heavy and toxic. Marcus Thorne had spent 30 years in public service. He had negotiated treaties. He had sat across the table from warlords and corporate raiders. He was not afraid of a 29-year-old guard with a badge purchased online. But he was angry, a cold, simmering anger that he had learned to channel into precision. Listen to me very carefully, Marcus said, his voice projecting clearly enough for the woman recording to pick it up. My name is Marcus Thorne. I am a federal official. I have a meeting in Geneva tomorrow that concerns national security. By obstructing my entry, you are not just inconveniencing me. You are interfering with federal business. Under Title 18, Section 111 of the United States Code, you are currently committing a felony. Kyle blinked. The specific legal citation hit him like a physical blow. Most people shouted obscenities. Most people begged. They didn't quote federal code. But Kyle's ego was a fragile thing, and when threatened, it lashed out. I don't care about your codes, Kyle shouted, pulling the taser fully out of its holster. He didn't point it directly at Marcus yet, but he held it at the low ready. You're trespassing on private property. That's the law I care about. This is a mixed-use facility with federal jurisdiction on floors 35 through 45, Marcus countered. You are a contractor. You do not have the power of arrest. You have the power to observe and report. You have exceeded your authority. I said back up. Kyle stepped forward again, brandishing the weapon. Marcus didn't flinch. I am standing in a public lobby. I have the right to be here. I have offered you proof of my identity, which you refuse to look at because it contradicts the narrative you've created in your head. Last warning, Kyle screamed. Get on the ground. No, Marcus said simply. I will not get on the ground. I am not a criminal. I am not a threat. I am a 58-year-old man with a bad knee and a government briefing to attend. I will wait right here for the police. Kyle didn't know what to do. The man wasn't running. He wasn't fighting. He was just standing, and that defiance was unbearable. Kyle needed to dominate the situation. He needed to prove he was the one in control. Turn around, Kyle barked. Hands behind your back. Am I under arrest? Marcus asked. You're being detained for safety, Kyle said, reaching for his handcuffs. For whose safety? Marcus asked. Yours, because I am clearly not a danger to anyone here. Turn around now or I will tase you. Kyle raised the weapon, the red laser dot dancing on Marcus's chest. At this, the crowd that had gathered gasped. The woman recording shouted, He hasn't done anything. Put that away. Marcus looked at the taser, then at Kyle's shaking hand. He calculated the risk. If he resisted, he would get tased. If he complied, he would be humiliated, but he would be safe, and his lawsuit would be airtight. I am complying under duress, Marcus announced loudly. I am not resisting. I am placing my hands behind my back to ensure my own physical safety against an unstable armed guard. He turned slowly. He dropped his briefcase. He placed his hands behind his back. Kyle holstered the taser and grabbed Marcus's wrists roughly. He wrenched Marcus's arms up higher than necessary, causing a sharp pain in Marcus's shoulder. Easy, Marcus whispered, the pain evident in his voice. I have a rotator cuff injury. You should have thought about that before you acted like a tough guy, Kyle muttered. He slapped the handcuffs on. Click, click. The metal bit into Marcus's skin. Kyle spun Marcus around and shoved him toward a waiting chair near the security desk. Sit down. And don't move. Marcus sat. He sat with his spine straight, his chin up. He looked like a king on a throne, even with his hands cuffed behind him in a plastic chair. He stared directly at the camera he knew was there. He was memorizing everything. The time on the wall clock, 10:52 a.m. The name on Kyle's badge, K. Vance. The terrified look on the janitor's face. You're making a mistake you can't come back from, Marcus said softly. Shut up, Kyle said, pacing back and forth, adrenaline still spiking. Police are 5 minutes out. Then we'll see who the federal agent is. The minutes that followed were a study in contrast. On one side was Kyle Vance, pacing nervously, checking his radio, glaring at the witnesses to intimidate them into silence. On the other was Marcus Thorne, sitting perfectly still, his breathing controlled, his eyes tracking every movement. Being handcuffed was a new experience for Marcus. He had visited prisons. He had drafted policies regarding detention. But he had never felt the cold steel on his own wrists. It was degrading. It was designed to make him feel small, powerless, and criminal. But Marcus did not feel small. He felt a profound, burning clarity. He thought about his father who had marched in Selma. He thought about the stories of men who didn't have his title, his education, or his connections. Men who were stopped in lobbies and cars in parks, and who didn't survive the encounter, or who had their lives ruined by a charge of resisting. This is why I am here, Marcus thought, to bear witness. Hey, Kyle yelled at the woman recording. You can't film here. Private property. I'm in a public access area, the woman shot back. She was young, maybe 30, and clearly not easily rattled. And I'm documenting a potential civil rights violation. I'm not going anywhere. I can have you arrested too, Kyle threatened, taking a step toward her. Officer Vance. Marcus spoke up, his voice cutting through the noise. If you approach that witness, you will be adding witness intimidation to your list of offenses. I strongly suggest you stay at your post. Kyle spun around. I told you to be quiet. And I am telling you that you have already buried yourself, Marcus said. Don't pull the dirt in on top of you. Kyle looked like he wanted to strike Marcus. He clenched his fists, but the presence of the camera held him back. He returned to his podium, aggressively typing something into his log, trying to create a paper trail that would justify his actions. Subject was belligerent, refused to show ID, attempted to bypass security. Marcus watched him type. He knew exactly what Kyle was writing. He had seen hundreds of police reports that used the same creative writing techniques. The elevator chimed. A group of lawyers from a firm on the 20th floor walked out talking and laughing. They stopped dead when they saw the scene. Is that? One of the lawyers, a tall white man in a gray suit, squinted. He looked at Marcus. Mr. Thorne. Marcus looked at the lawyer. He recognized him. James Sterling, a partner at a firm that did government contracting. Hello, James, Marcus said pleasantly. Forgive me for not shaking hands. I seem to be tied up. What the hell is going on? Sterling asked, looking at Kyle. Why is Marcus Thorne in handcuffs? He's a trespasser, Kyle said, though his voice wavered slightly. Refused to show ID. Trespasser. Sterling laughed, a harsh, incredulous sound.
He's the reason half the funding for this building exists. He's a senior advisor to DHS.
Take those cuffs off him immediately. I can't, Kyle stammered. Police are inbound. He's in custody.
You are an idiot, Sterling said, shaking his head. He pulled out his phone. I'm calling the building management. This is insane. Stay out of it, Kyle yelled, losing control again. This is a security matter. This is a lawsuit waiting to happen. Sterling corrected. He looked at Marcus. Do you need representation, Marcus? I think the facts will represent themselves, James, Marcus replied. But thank you. Please just observe. I want as many independent eyes on this as possible. At that moment, the revolving doors spun. 2 uniformed officers from the Metropolitan Police Department entered. They looked ready for a fight, hands on their holsters, responding to a combative male call. Kyle let out a breath of relief. Over here. That's him. The officers approached. One was a sergeant older with weary eyes. The other was a rookie.
They looked at Kyle. Then they looked at the well-dressed, handcuffed black man sitting calmly in the chair. Then at the lawyer standing nearby. Then at the woman filming. The sergeant's eyes narrowed. He had been a cop for 20 years. He knew what a combative trespasser looked like, and he knew what a disaster looked like. This looked like a disaster. Sergeant Miller did not draw his weapon. He held up a hand to his partner to signal slow down. He walked over to Kyle, ignoring Kyle's attempt to start rambling his version of events. Officers, thank God, Kyle said, breathless. This guy tried to force his way past the turnstiles. Refused to show ID, got aggressive, threatened me. I had to detain him. Sergeant Miller looked at Marcus. Sir, what's your side? Good morning, Sergeant, Marcus said. My name is Marcus Thorne. My government ID is in my inside jacket pocket. My wallet with my driver's license is also there. I was attempting to enter my office on the 40th floor when this guard physically assaulted me and then detained me for trespassing despite my possession of a valid access key. Miller looked at Kyle. You cuffed him for trespassing. He wouldn't identify himself, Kyle insisted. He was acting suspicious. I offered to show him my federal credentials, Marcus added. He demanded a driver's license and refused to look at my key card. Miller turned to Kyle. Did he offer federal ID? He said he had it, Kyle stuttered. But anyone can say that. I needed to see a license. Standard procedure. Standard procedure, Miller repeated dryly. He turned back to Marcus. Sir, I'm going to have to check your ID. Is it okay if I reach into your pocket? You have my permission, Marcus said. Miller stepped forward. He reached delicately into Marcus's blazer. He pulled out a leather wallet and a hard plastic ID holder on a chain. He looked at the ID. It was a Department of Homeland Security badge. It had the gold chip. It had the seal. It had the rank senior advisor. Miller looked at the badge. Then he looked at Marcus. He recognized the face now. He had seen this man on the news during the last infrastructure bill hearings. Miller closed his eyes for a brief second, exhaling a long sigh of frustration. He turned to his rookie partner. Get the key. The key? The rookie asked. The handcuff key, Miller snapped. Get him out of those cuffs, now. Wait, Kyle protested. You can't just let him go. I have to file a report. You have the right to remain silent, Miller said to Kyle, his voice low and dangerous. And I suggest you use it before you talk yourself into a charge. Just then, the elevator doors opened again. This time, it wasn't a lawyer. It was Mr. Henderson, the building's security director. He was a man in his late 50s wearing a suit, looking flushed as if he had run down the stairs. James Sterling had evidently made his call. Henderson scanned the lobby. He saw the police. He saw Kyle. And he saw Marcus Thorne standing up as the rookie officer removed the handcuffs.
Henderson looked like he was going to be sick. He rushed forward, ignoring Kyle completely. "Mr. Thorne," Henderson said, his voice trembling. "Mr. Thorne, I am absolutely horrified. I just got the call." Marcus rubbed his wrists. There were red welts where the metal had dug in. He looked at Henderson. "Good morning, Bill. We need to talk about your staffing protocols. This is completely unacceptable," Henderson said, turning on Kyle with a fury that made the young guard shrink back. "Vance, what in God's name did you do?" "I was doing my job," Kyle pleaded, though his voice was thin now. He looked suspicious. He wouldn't listen. "That is Marcus Thorne," Henderson shouted, his voice cracking. "He has the highest clearance level in this entire building. He has been a tenant here for 10 years. How could you possibly think he was a trespasser?" He was wearing jeans," Kyle mumbled. The silence that followed was deafening. Marcus stepped forward. He didn't yell. He didn't scream. He just looked at Kyle with a mixture of pity and contempt. "He was wearing jeans," Marcus repeated. "That was your probable cause. That was your entire investigation." The dynamic in the lobby had shifted tectonically. 5 minutes ago, Kyle Vance had been the king of his little castle, brandishing a taser and barking orders. Now he was standing alone, isolated, as the real power in the room coalesced around the man he had tried to humiliate. Marcus took charge. He didn't ask. He commanded. "Bill," Marcus said to the security director, "I want the hard drives from the security cameras pulled immediately. I want the audio and video from the lobby, the exterior entrance, and the elevator bank. I want them secured and a chain of custody established. Nothing gets deleted. Nothing gets corrupted." "Consider it done," Henderson said, already typing on his phone. "Sergeant," Marcus turned to the police officer, "I want to file a formal complaint for assault, false imprisonment, and battery. I want this man's information, full name, date of birth, and employer details included in the report." "Yes, sir," Sergeant Miller said respectfully. "We'll take the report right now." Kyle looked around, panic setting in. "Assault? I didn't assault anyone. I was detaining a suspect." "You laid hands on me before I was detained," Marcus said calmly. "You shoved me. That is battery. You handcuffed me without cause. That is false imprisonment. And you did it all based on a discriminatory profile. That is a civil rights violation." "I want a union rep," Kyle said, clutching his belt. "You're a contractor," Henderson spat. "You don't have a union rep here, and as of right now, you are relieved of duty. Hand over your badge and your weapon." "You can't fire me," Kyle argued. "I was following protocol." "Show me the protocol that says you shove a tenant because you don't like his pants," Henderson said. "Give me the badge, now, or the officers will take it for you." Kyle looked at the police. They weren't going to help him. They were looking at him with the disdain professionals reserve for amateurs who make their lives difficult. Slowly shaking with rage and fear, Kyle unclipped his badge. He unbuckled his belt. He placed them on the security desk, the desk that was no longer his. "This is bullshit," Kyle muttered. "You're ruining my life over nothing." Marcus stepped closer to him. He was rubbing his wrist where the skin was beginning to bruise. "You ruined your own life, son," Marcus said. "You saw a black man and you decided he didn't belong. You decided you had to put him in his place. You didn't care about the facts. You didn't care about the law. You just wanted to feel powerful." Marcus leaned in, his voice dropping to a whisper that only Kyle could hear. "I have spent my entire career protecting this country. I have drafted laws that keep you safe at night, and you treated me like a criminal because of your own prejudice. You didn't just make a mistake. You revealed who you are." Kyle looked away. He couldn't hold Marcus's gaze. "Get him out of here," Henderson ordered. "Escort him off the property." The police officers didn't arrest Kyle on the spot that would come later after the warrant, but they escorted him out. The woman with the phone filmed him walking out the revolving doors, stripped of his gear, looking small and defeated. Marcus turned to the woman.
"Thank you," he said. "Please keep that video safe." "I've already uploaded it to the cloud," she said, her hands shaking slightly now that the adrenaline was fading. "And I'm sending it to you." By Monday morning, the incident was no longer a misunderstanding in a lobby. It was a national headline. Senior DHS advisor handcuffed for shopping while black in D.C. high-rise. The headline wasn't perfectly accurate. He wasn't shopping, but the sentiment stuck. The video the woman recorded had gone viral. It showed the crucial moments, Marcus calmly explaining the law, Kyle screaming and escalating the handcuffs. It showed the dignity of the older man and the unhinged aggression of the younger one. Marcus didn't just let the court of public opinion do the work, though. He filed a federal lawsuit against Citadel Security Solutions. He sued for civil rights violations, negligence in hiring, and emotional distress. The discovery phase of the lawsuit was devastating for Citadel. Marcus's legal team, led by top civil rights attorneys, subpoenaed Kyle Vance's personnel files. They found what everyone suspected, but no one had proven. Kyle had 6 previous complaints against him in 2 years. All of them involved minority men. One was a delivery driver he had harassed. One was a visiting client he had refused entry to. The company had dismissed every single complaint as unfounded, or he said, she said. They had kept him employed because he was cheap and he showed up on time. But they couldn't ignore this one. The deposition of the Citadel CEO was brutal. Under oath, he had to admit that they had no specific training on implicit bias. He had to admit they hadn't vetted Kyle's background, which included a dishonorable discharge from the reserves for unsurprisingly insubordination and aggression. The media coverage was relentless. Because Marcus was who he was, a calm, articulate, high-ranking official, he became the perfect face for the issue. If it could happen to him, it could happen to anyone. "I am not special," Marcus said in an interview with CNN. "I just had the resources to fight back. Imagine if I had been an intern. Imagine if I had been a janitor. Would anyone have believed me? Would the police have taken the cuffs off?" The Department of Homeland Security launched a review of all private security contracts in federal buildings. The contract with Citadel was terminated immediately, a loss of $15 million a year for the company. Their stock price plummeted. Kyle Vance was charged criminally with assault and false imprisonment. He pleaded guilty to avoid jail time, receiving probation, and a permanent mark on his record. He lost his security license. He was barred from working in any security capacity in the District of Columbia, Maryland, and Virginia. But the real victory wasn't the punishment of one guard. It was the systemic change. The lawsuit settlement, $2.5 million, was donated entirely by Marcus to a legal defense fund for victims of racial profiling. 6 months later, Marcus Thorne walked into the same lobby. It was a Tuesday. He was wearing a suit this time, but he knew it shouldn't have mattered. The security desk had been remodeled. The logo on the wall was different. A new security firm had taken over. The guards were different too. They were a diverse team trained specifically in de-escalation and customer service. As Marcus approached the turnstiles, a young guard, a white man in his 20s, looked up. He smiled. "Good morning, Mr. Thorne," the guard said. "Good to see you." "Good morning," Marcus replied. "Do you need help with your bag, sir?" "No, I've got it, thank you." Marcus swiped his card. The light turned green. He walked through. It was simple. It was mundane. It was exactly how it was supposed to be. But as he stepped into the elevator and the doors closed, cocooning him in silence, Marcus didn't feel triumphant. He felt tired. He leaned his head back against the mirrored wall of the elevator. He thought about the energy it took just to exist in certain spaces. He thought about the fear he had seen in Kyle Vance's eyes, not fear of Marcus, but fear of losing his perceived superiority. He looked at his wrists. The bruises were long gone, but the memory of the cold metal remained. It was a ghost that would haunt him, a reminder that no amount of education, no title, and no service to his country could fully shield him from the assumptions of others. The elevator chimed at the 40th floor. Marcus straightened his tie. He picked up his briefcase. He put the mask of professional detachment back on. He stepped out into the hallway, ready to advise the secretary on how to protect the nation. He was a hero to many, a symbol of justice. But in the quiet moments, he knew the truth. He had won this battle, but the war was fought in a million parking lots, lobbies, and roadsides every single day, often by people who didn't have a badge to save them. Conclusion: this story isn't just about a bad security guard or a lawsuit. It's about the fragility of dignity. It's about how quickly a lifetime of achievement can be dismissed by a single glance from someone who refuses to see you as a human being. Marcus Thorne won because he had power, but his victory highlights the vulnerability of those who don't. What would have happened if Marcus wasn't a federal advisor? What if he was just a father trying to get to work? That is the question that should keep us up at night. How would you have reacted if you were in Marcus's shoes? Would you have kept your cool, or would you have fought back? Let me know in the comments below. And if you believe that respect shouldn't depend on your job title, hit that like button and subscribe for more stories that expose the truth.